So this briefing session is about the February 6th Turkey southeastern earthquake. So Irides is holding this briefing session. So I'm Moriguchi, who will be chairing this briefing session today. So we'd like to start. I would like to have a greeting from the director, Mihiko Imamura of Irides. I'm Imamura. So thank you very much for attending this briefing session for a very short notice. So 21st century is set to be a large-scale disaster century. So in the morning of February 6th, in East Anatolia fault area, there was a large earthquake. So even now, there's active aftershocks. So up to now, there has been more than 20,000 victims registered, and the number is counting. So I'd like to extend my deep condolences to those who lost their lives. So about this earthquake, so why it happened in this timing and why the damage was so extensive, and for the rescue and restoration operations, what can be noted, and what will be the challenges for the reconstruction. So the members of our faculty have compiled this material in very short time, as the situation will be changing. So as we share our materials, we hope it will contribute to the future restoration and rescue operation. It's a very limited time, but I hope our report will contribute to your active discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director Imamura. I would like to start the report. So we have 6 members of Irides sharing the results of the information collection and the research. So after all the presentation, we'll have question and answer. So first, from the Earthquake and Volcanic Activity Lab from Shinji Toda. So I'd like to present about where this earthquake happened and how much could be predicted about this earthquake and what it means when it's projected into Japan. So Turkey is one of those countries which have lots of earthquakes. You see, Turkey is surrounded by tectonic plates. So they have North Anatolia fault, they have East Anatolian fault, and this is the epicenter. And in the Mediterranean Sea, so in the 4th century, there was a crater earthquake, which caused lots of damage. And in Turkey, so this East Anatolian fault is most known. And this North Anatolian fault has caused a lot of earthquakes. So it's longer than 1,000 kilometers. So this is a fault system. And in 1939, there was a magnitude of 7.8 earthquake in 1939, almost in the same scale. And more than 30,000 people lost their lives. So after that, so along this fault line system, there were so many earthquakes 1 year after, several years after. So earthquakes happened, moved to westward. And in 1999, there's a large earthquake, so which was this Izmit city, and more than 20,000 people lost their lives. As I said, it's like the domino effect. So after this the earthquake, there was another earthquake. So that shows how related these fault lines and these earthquake activities are related to each other. So this tectonic plates, so there's a research on this. So it's about 90 million years ago, this Arabian tectonic plate moves northward. This is a source of everything, so it crashes into the east side of Turkey. So it's moving the entire Turkey into west. So as you see in this bottom right chart, you see this is a iron block to the top block. The top block is moving westward. So you see there's a horizontal movement on the top, that's North Anatolian fault. And you see right here, there's a East Anatolian fault. So this is how these two faults were created and how this Anatolian tectonic plate moves. It can actually be monitored with the satellite. So this is using GPS and showing that from Eurasian plate, this is how Anatolian plate is moving. So this is about 3 centimeters. So from 2 to 3 centimeters, so it's the entire plate is moving. So this is coming from the movement of Arabian tectonic plate. So as we analyze it in details, so this fault lines and along there, how strain happens around there, we can see it. So this is from the research group of the UK. So you see these red areas. So you see the strain, the annual strain is culminating pretty rapid. So you see this North Anatolian fault, there's a large movement, and this East Anatolian line, there isn't much strain. So that's how we evaluate it, but this is where the earthquake happened, but we need to be careful that this is like ongoing strain culminating effect. So this is not about the total culmination of the strain. So this East Anatolian fault area, fault system. See, this is a border of tectonic plate, but this is very complicated how these faults are located. But this east part is very simple, but here it's very complicated. Because there are many branches. So this movement, so we call it slip rate. So in average, how much this fault moves. So it's about 10 millimeters annually. So this is about the east side. And west side, because it's complicated, so each fault line, like these are all disseminated, the smaller movement causing earthquakes. So as a reference, this is a Japanese central active fault system. So it is about the same ratio of movement. So this is where the earthquake happened. About 200 to 300 kilometers fault moved. So this is magnitude 7.8. So probably about 10 meters of movement would have happened on the ground. So how could we have predicted this earthquake, is for this long fault system. So we use segments. So it's hard to imagine an earthquake that moves the entire fault line. So here we have 5 segments. So in this epicenter area, probably magnitude 7.4, 7.5 were predicted. So on the bottom right, you see this is a hazard map. So this is about the acceleration. So you see the red area has a higher acceleration rate. So this area was actually predicted that the hazard rate was lower with a lower magnitude and with a lower strain. So the hazard was predicted to be low. But after that, 9 hours after the initial quake, there was this magnitude 7.5. So this was predicted to be the maximum 7.1 magnitude and also the lower hazard area. So this was the large aftershock. So how the first earthquake caused the second one? So as we have been researching, when a large earthquake happens, around there's a strain movement. So these red area are prone to next earthquake. So this is from the main shock, what happened after that. So this star mark was the next earthquake, magnitude 7.5. So you see this is backcast evaluation that we can see shaped like this way. So with this 7.5 magnitude earthquake, this is another calculation. So in these red areas are prone to the risk of earthquakes. So this aftershock area, you see this is a large area that's been damaged. So the earthquake itself, compared to Hanshin Awaji or Kumamoto earthquake, it's very large. So this is a very wide area being affected. This large-scale inland earthquake, so how many it has happened. So after the year 2000, so we see, so including this earthquake, we have registered 5 of this scale of inland earthquake. So the recent one was in New Zealand. You see the Sichuan earthquake in China, magnitude 7.9. So I'd like you to see the length of the fault line, but also the number of people who were dead or missing. So it's about whether there's a dense population along the fault line. So you see in the Alaska part, we have no dead people registered. So in this large fault line, when we compare it with Japanese active fault line, so this is in the same scale. So you see the Kumamoto, and this is a Nobi earthquake. So this is this length. So you see in Japan, it's like the central fault line, the majority of it has moved if it was Japan. So when this kind of earthquake happened, so the area of damage will be very large, and there'll be a large area suffering the earthquake level 7, 6 plus, and also there will be many affected active fault line systems. So it was very brief, but this is it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Toda, Professor Toda, from the fault line and mechanism of the earthquake happening. So one important announcement I'd like to make. So today we have English simultaneous translation. So you see below your Zoom screen, you probably see a translation button. So if you prefer to hear English, please choose English. So the next briefing from the earthquake engineering, Susumu Ono, associate professor, and Ryutai Nokida, associate professor, about the nature of earthquake and damage to buildings. Right, thank you very much for your introduction. I'm Ono from earthquake engineering. So I'd like to talk about the seismic motion of this earthquake. So this is the movement from the earthquake. So for Turkey, we have a AFAD, Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, monitoring it. So this is a seismic activity. So you see it was monitored in entire Turkey. So their record after the earthquake, it was open, but it was closed for temporarily, and it was reopened. So the material we have is based on reopened, revised data. So it must be a little different from current data. So we also have Kandili Observatory Earthquake Research Institute. So this monitors the database of Europe and Middle East publishing this data. So we use these data to talk, but and also we use AFAD's data. So I'll be focusing on the main shock. So this is based on AFAD, the magnitude level, and the peak acceleration and peak velocity. And you see there was a fault line along this line as it was presented. So along the fault line, there were many monitoring points. So you see it in this linear area, and also the peak ground acceleration and peak ground velocity. So you see all these data are distributed along this fault line. So in terms of the JMA intensity, so the reds are stronger than level 6, and there was some part which registered stronger to level 7. So this horizontal axis is the acceleration level, and also the vertical axis is velocity. So the red is this earthquake, and the cross are the Tohoku earthquake 2011. So green are the other Japan's inland earthquakes which cause big damage. So you see, so when there's damage, so both maximum velocity, maximum acceleration, both are very high to cause huge damage. So see that this record, the both maximum velocity and acceleration were very high. So you see like Fukiai, Machiya, those from Japanese records, they're similar data. So on the right, this is also about alt spectra, about the frequency. So on the left is the short frequency tremor, on the right is a long frequency tremor. So the blue and green are past Japanese inland earthquakes, and red lines are from this earthquake in Turkey. So these are from the large places where a large tremor was registered. So it's about the same scale. So This earthquake had a magnitude 7.8. That was very strong. So the stronger the magnitude, the larger the frequency from the epicenter. So this amplification of the long frequency is actually larger. So in Japan, the Kumamoto earthquake was the largest in long frequency, but it's actually even larger than the Kumamoto case. So this map is a shake map, and I borrowed it from USGS. And you see along the fault line, so were points that registered strong tremor. We have the velocity waveform and also the particle trajectory. So we have the both north, south, and east, west. So which direction there was a tremor. So this along the fault line, this seismic movement. So it's often characteristic pulse-shaped waveforms. And when a fault line is close to the surface, there's a clear pulse and fring line characteristic pulse. And they are both directory, they have directions. So you see these pulse waves are registered, observed, and you see there are directions in the seismic movement. So this is just short notice briefing, but we will see how these data are distributed and how they correlate with the damage. So we'll be analyzing that. So from me, this is it. So pass it on to Associate Professor Enokida. Very much. So I'm from Irides Enokida. So now in the disaster area, the situation is very hard. So I'm collecting broadcasted data for the damage to the buildings. So we are hearing the situations. So it is very difficult for us to imagine. So we have mapped these name of places and distance from the epicenter. So this is very rough, but so we have seen these collapsal buildings within 300 kilometers from the epicenter. So in these place 1 to 8 are places where we see buildings collapsed, and you also see the distance from the epicenter. So the closest is Kahraman Maras, is about 45 kilometers from the epicenter. See the huge damage with completely collapsed. So this is a maple steel RC frame. And some of the higher parts of the building are still in form, but they have collapsed. So this is Aleppo. It's about 100 kilometers from epicenter. You see the sun-dried brick structures have completely collapsed. And we also see about 110 kilometers from epicenter Sarmada, they have reinforced concrete with bricks filling the space, and that's also collapsed. And San Lufa is about 155 kilometers from epicenter. You also see the reinforced concrete buildings collapsed. And this is west from epicenter. This is Adana, 155 kilometers. You also see the cases where reinforced concrete buildings have collapsed. so-called pancake crash have occurred. So Malatya is about 170 kilometers, and you also see buildings completely collapsed with a pancake crash. Diyarbakir, about 290 kilometers from epicenter, where you also see the complete collapse of building. So this is additional. So this is Antakya, about 130 kilometers. We see A, B, C, D, 4 A, B, D buildings that have collapsed. The C building have survived. So we have found the photo before the disaster on the Google map. So A is bottom left. So you also see B, C, D on the right, relatively new. So this C has survived. So this is an anti-seismic design. So about 80 years ago, 1944, there was a first seismic building code, and there have been revision. And 1998, so there was a new building code that takes into consideration the building's movement. So in a short-term perspective, so we need to see the remaining buildings, evaluation of them, and screening to how to see which buildings have a risk of collapse with aftershock. So in Japan, we have this evaluation, and also in the US, we have post-earthquake safety evaluation. In the earthquake 1999, we have contributed technically past the evaluation. And in a long-term perspective, so with Japan, there's a common challenge. So in a piloti style earthquake where the ground floor have less seismic structure, so there's a strong demand across countries and regions. So we need to have more seismic resilience. So we see that there are lots of damage before the revision of the building code. So for Japan to contribute, we can contribute with the anti-seismic buildings and also reinforcing building while using it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ono, Mr. Enokida, about the seismic movement and also the locations of places and damages to the building. So the following is a disaster informatics. So this is a preliminary building damage assessment using remote sensing data from Professor Koshimura. Okay, so I'm Koshimura. So I'd like to talk about the wide area damage assessment with remote sensing. So with contribution from Riken, and also the students from IRIDES. So first, for this project, there have been lots of contributions. So this is acknowledgement for the satellite images about the building data's international cooperation. So I'd like to say thank you to these organizations. So we have learned building damage mapping using AI. So for this case, we would like you to see the actual methods with these papers, so we don't have much time. So these are methods we use. So the time as of yesterday, this is a satellite data acquisition. This is around the epicenter. So mainly we're using Maxer from the US and also Japan's JAXA LLC2. So we have used these data. So the red area were photographed by Maxer after the earthquake. Blue were photographed before the earthquake. So you see this far from grasping the entire area, but I'm sure that we'll see more and more areas in the affected areas. So today, this is last year, one of the affected area by very strong tremor. So I'd like to report the analysis of this area. So this is the satellite image by Maxer after the earthquake. So we have analyzed it with AI, also using Google Street View. So especially these collapsed buildings are in what kind of situation. So I'd like to walk you through a few examples. So on the left is before the earthquake, on the right is after the earthquake. So you see many buildings have collapsed or heavily damaged. So you can clearly see that. So using AI to analyze it, but at the same time, we also have a building data published by Microsoft. So we utilize that data. This is a land use map, including the form of buildings. So the red is a form of buildings. So using this data together with Microsoft's data, which shows the form of the building. So using the difference of two, we can see buildings damaged. So here in last year, it's recognized. So we have registered 5,252 buildings, and using AI-based recognition, so there were 3,561 buildings. So these were recognized as buildings. So what it means is surviving slight damage, moderate, severe damage. So these are buildings that suffer those kinds of damage. And buildings that were registered as collapsed, so 148. So they were completely collapsed. And at this moment, there are buildings that are to be confirmed, about 1,543. So we still need to research on these. So in these entire buildings, so 2.8% of buildings completely collapsed, and 68% of buildings either suffering severe damage, slight, moderate, those kind of damage. So as an overview, what we know at this moment in Gaziantep province, there were 5,252 buildings. So using satellite image, we know at least 148 buildings were collapsed and 3,569 buildings still exist, and 1,543 need to be confirmed. So our further discussions and challenges, so using satellite photographing, so we can see more quantitative recognition, identification of the building damage, but also understanding the relationship among the damage and shaking intensity, severity of damage, and structural types and age, and also how it relates to urban development and relationship to the building codes. So various elements have relationship to the damage to buildings. So we'd like to analyze these relationships. So we have developed this method of understanding buildings damage using AI. So they have to be utilized very rapidly after the disaster occurred. So it is essential to work with a lot of institutions, international bodies. So we like to make it more usable, make automatic, rapid, and more used in the society. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Koshimura. These are AI and satellite image recognition. So we have talked about the engineering and science. So next is a briefing from the medical field. So from the disaster medical research, international medical research about rescue operations and health issues in a disaster area. You can see the image. So I'd like to present about the health issues in a disaster area. I'm Sasaki from IRIS. So challenges about rescuing and also the hypothermia and the health issues after that. So what do you see? The image, this is a capture from Reuters YouTube. So about the rescue operations, probably you have seen many of these images. So this collapsed building. So you see this is a building next has collapsed while rescue operation. So there are 3 points. So number 3 will be touched upon later in relation to hypothermia. So I'd like to talk about the point 1 and 2. So this is about being careful to the secondary disaster because of the aftershocks. So these people wearing rescue uniforms often got involved in aftershocks and building collapse. For the disaster medical practices, obviously one's own safety is most important. So if you become somebody to be rescued, obviously that will be more burden on the ground. And also this will be a decreased capability of rescuing, but also they have to be there, obviously, to do rescue activities. So this is very difficult to make judgment. But as Mr. Toda was talking, there will be more aftershocks. So I just pray there will be less secondary disaster and people will be more cautious to those damages. Also about the dealing with crash syndrome, it is a little before thing. But what happens is when somebody has their limbs under the rubble, so when they are rescued, so what happens is a shock. What happens is poisonous element that happened with these parts of the body under the rubble is suddenly rescued. So that happened in Hanshin earthquake. So what's needed is to make a treatment even before rescuing. But we know that obviously there was extensive damage, so they have shortage of personnel, and relief supplies. So when this crash syndrome happens, they need to be treated. After that, obviously an issue is whether the public medical institutions are still operating. So we see many news where there's extensive damage. So I couldn't really see. So this crash syndrome might need artificial dialysis. So they might have to be carried to remote areas where lifelines are still active. But if that's possible is another question. So apart from crash syndrome, but also for the affected people's treatment. It is very important to see the medical organizations operating. So this is hypothermia. So this is same image from Reuters. So you see a girl rescued from the collapsed building. So you see there's snow. So there's a hypothermia. So how to avoid the hazard. So now many people have to live outside because they have lost their homes. And also they are afraid about the aftershocks and further collapse. I have seen the remarks. So that today's temperature is -4 Celsius. So it is colder than Sendai today. So hypothermia, their feel-like temperature is external temperature minus wind speed. So, and the body is wet, it's further -10. So with this earthquake happened when 4 o'clock in the morning, so people are sleeping. So we see that when people receive their not so well dressed, so you see people quickly get hypothermia, and many evacuees, I see they don't have enough clothing. So obviously this will lead to the risk of their lives. So if you see mountaineering magazines, they do experiments of hypothermia. So like 1 degree of temperature of body temperature will be lost every minute. So ultimately, it's about taking shelter indoors, also from cold floor, concrete, that will deprive people's body temperature. And obviously, if their clothes are wet, they need to change for dry clothes and warm drinks. And dehydration is always a problem. So it is important to be hydrated, and taking calorie is very important. But we see that the damage is so widespread, so probably there isn't enough space, even the space to have a tent. So considering the scale of the damage, the warm environment and minimum supplies for like water and food seems not enough. So along with the rescue, it's about preventing the disaster deaths that could have been prevented will be very important. So I'm certain that it will be a long-term effort to support the victims. So we need to have mental cares and injuries related to rescue and all these other related diseases that happens related to the disaster we have experienced with the Tohoku earthquake in 2011. So a medical team of IRDIS have compiled these medical problems after the disaster. So we have compiled this pamphlet. So Turkey and Japan, obviously the climate, culture, social structure are different, but still I think some of them will be useful. So if you Google with disaster and health, Tokyo University, this pamphlet will be available. At the moment, we have only Japanese and English. There's no Turkish version, but using tools like Google Lens, probably they can get information. There isn't much we can do as we are so remote, but we would like to offer information for disaster victims or those who support those disaster victims. And for us we still have many disaster risks in the future, so we should be prepared for the hypothermia that can be caused in future disasters in Japan. So there will be things we can contribute for the reconstruction, and for the BCP as well. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Okay, so the crash syndrome, hypothermia, that's a very important perspective. Thank you very much. So the next will be the last briefing from Mikio Takeya, professor. So this is about the Turkish disaster prevention system and the future support. So can you hear me? So this is not an academic briefing, as we are visiting I'm visiting professor. So this is about what happened on the ground. So things to note is we don't have enough information. So this is my personal opinion. So also about the situation of the Turkish disaster prevention. So we have a report, very detailed report from JICA at that time, 2016. So JICA will be working on collecting information, but also when we have Japanese support activity moving forward, it's about what academia can do. So about the reconstruction. So Japan, the economic damage majority is a flood, but the death majority is the earthquake, and also the brick houses in developing countries, not only Turkey, but 2006 in Asia, Jakarta, in a very small area, more than 6,000 people died. The old wooden houses stood, but those brick structured houses have collapsed. You see on the left, these places have survived, but you see that TV and bookshelves have survived, but those brick structures have collapsed. So in Jakarta, so I also worked as a reconstruction advisor. So JICA has limited those these JICA's methods. Compatible houses were only supported. So in 1 year, we have done the Build Back Better activity for, in 1 year, 100,000 houses. So in case of Turkey, we assume there are many large houses, reinforced concrete. So important items from earthquake disaster. So in the rural areas, so these brick houses are non-engineered houses. So the residents themselves build it. So it's very difficult to have more of the building code, seismic building code followed. So that's very difficult. There are some large buildings, but in rural parts, that's not the case. So in the Nepal 2015 earthquake was the same. So these government buildings as well were often vulnerable, and these private housings were even more vulnerable. So these government buildings are very, very important to be reinforced. So how we can reinforce these private housings. So the whole society has to be rich. So how much we can support these private houses is very difficult. But in the Sendai framework of disaster prevention, so we really need this reconstruction thoughts to be followed. So we hope our reconstruction experience to be world standard. So this Build Back Better idea. So with the disaster as opportunity, so we use response to build back better for a better environment is written in this framework. So after this Sendai framework, so JICA has long supported Turkey's disaster prevention. So we say that past reports suggest it's the earthquake and flood that we need to support in Turkey, especially earthquake, this Anatolia, and also this densely populated area. So there was a risk of large-scale damage. So buildings and houses are not wooden houses. These are brick structured houses. So it is difficult to renew the house for the more stronger seismic resilience. So this is the layers of the Turkey's disaster prevention strategies, and seismic building code is very high quality, and they have a strong social system. So AFAD, so this is a national disaster management body. So now this ex-AFAD president is a vice president and working on this domestic handling. So they have come to Japan for to study with the JICA project. They have come to Kobe. They have also visited cabinet office, and he has respect for the Japan's disaster prevention insights. So he is at the top of this disaster response handling. So for Japan, it's easier to talk to. So as a JICA's project after 1990s, so this is how various support we have offered. And so for us, this Hyogo Prefecture and other local governments have worked with Turkey to build a relationship. So when Nepal earthquake happened in 2015, April, so the first aid works have went there to have a meeting with their Build Back Better scenario to discuss future support schemes. So 1 month after the disaster, we have done the seminar that JICA has tell their JICA insights about the disaster prevention. So we have launched a specialist team sent to Nepal, and we have done real-time responses for the donors. It is for Japan. We have Build Back Better as a precondition, so as a basic strategy of reconstruction, and also about the religious buildings, and also reconstruction, employment, support for the livelihood. So we have had this idea in the very early stage, working with the academia people. So there was very rapid consensus, and we have helped them form their policy. So we have done the seminar together with the embassy, Kobayashi ambassador, and the professors, Mr. Imamura, and I have done the moderation. And in 2 months, in June, we have done reconstruction donor meeting. So there were China from the foreign minister, and we have done this discussion, and we have done technical sessions. So we have presented that the technical contribution is very important, and this is actually win or lose situation of donors. So with our reconstruction philosophy of Build Back Better, we have actually presented to win the hegemony. And also we have other donors. So we have Foreign Ministry and JICA President. So it was for Nepalese government to decide which party they will listen to. So probably in the same way, so we'll have the president's office with AFAD at the head. So there'll be a new reconstruction system, and Japan will be responding to their needs for their reconstruction with consultants and academics. Obviously, now nothing has been decided, but this is how things will happen. So this vice president, somebody that I know very well. So probably after the initial rescue phase, so we hope that we can integrate all the Japanese insight and present it to Turkey. So as it is a competition among donors, but it is some donors might think it's just important to make new houses as soon as possible, even in the same way, because it's winter. Well, if that's it from me. Thank you very much. It's your concrete example and case studies of support. Thank you very much for your precious input. Closing remark from Shinichi Kuriyama, Professor Shinichi. I'm Kuriyama. So thank you very much for your opinions, active discussion. So I will be a next director from April. So obviously, I like to express deep condolence for those who have lost their lives or loved ones. So we, Tokyo University, Irides was founded with 2011 Tohoku earthquake. So lessons learned from that 2011 should be utilized this disaster this time too. So one thing is like 72 hours have passed, but I'd like to see the rescue operation continuing. And the second point, so there were mentions to they don't have enough supplies, there's a risk of hypothermia, but is that enough to send relief supplies? So in the case of the Tohoku earthquake, what's needed, where should relief supplies go? There was a big problem. So more than just sending supplies, we need input from embassy people, but at this very moment, probably like sending a donation will be very important. We have been helped a lot. And also the other day, using SNS for the Ukrainian war. So what will be needed on the ground? So we have done the research. So probably we can do the similar research with a mid to long-term support. We see there in Tohoku earthquakes, there was a issue of suicide. So at the beginning, there wasn't high rate, but we had the higher rate soon after that. So as this preparation that you have been discussing, so the lessons for this earthquake about the anti-seismic reinforcement in Japan, probably it's more progressed, but is it really enough for the predicted Tokyo earthquake or South Sea tsunami? So I think in Japan too, we should rethink about our own our preparation and with our own building codes. And for the predicted Tokyo earthquake, I think we should revise our own practice to things like fixing our own furniture. So with these discussions, we'll obviously continue our own research, and as an entire university, Tohoku University likes to collect all the wisdom of academics, so our past research and lessons learned as well. So from March 10th to 12th, we have the World's Bosai Forum, and we will hold emergency sessions about Turkish earthquake that happens in February. So thank you very much for your precious time. Thank you very much for your discussions. Thank you very much.